All right, Garrett, let's talk about 1031 exchanges. Okay, so we want to talk about kind of what are they, why are they important, and then maybe the mechanics of a 1031 exchange. The idea being, in general, is that you have a piece of real estate and maybe there's a lot of equity in it, and if you sold it, then you would have to pay a lot of capital gains, typically a residence or something like that. And so this mechanism allows you to sell the real estate and roll it into another piece of real estate, such as, for example, commercial real estate, multifamily. And how do you do that? What are the benefits doing? That's what we want to talk about here today, all about 1031 exchanges. So Garrett, talk about, who aren't familiar, what is a 1031 exchange at the high level?
Sure. So before I say that, I just wanted to mention that Michael and I are both not licensed tax advisors, CPAs, anything like that. So please check with your CPA before taking any advice from us. We're not here to give it. We're just here to share what we know by being in the business. So I just wanted to give you guys that disclaimer before I get into anything here. But
It's a good point, Garrett.
yeah, a 1031 exchange is basically an IRS strategy that allows real estate owners to defer capital gains taxes by rolling your profits into a like-kind property. So generally, if you're going to sell a piece of property at a profit, whatever that profit is susceptible to either short or long-term capital gains tax. And what you're able to do is take that full amount of profit and find another property and then roll it into that so that you can use that as the next down payment inside of the next property. But it has to be a like kind property in order to take full advantage of the 1031 exchange. We are very familiar with this strategy on the passive side and active side because we've done quite a few of these passively, but high level, that's what it is.
All right, just to summarize, basically, it's a way for someone to sell a piece of property and roll it into a larger like kind, equal to or greater than property. And so this allows people to defer taxes, sometimes forever. And that's how people can roll into larger and larger pieces of real estate. And and that's normally the way it happens. You're going from one, let's say you have a rental property, and then let's say you buy a small multifamily, and then years later you roll it into a larger multifamily, and then you roll it over and buy a retail center of some sort. So it really allows you to compound it a lot faster. But why is it so valuable to someone who might have a bunch of equity in a piece of real estate? Why should people care about this 1031 exchange thing?
Yeah, because they can realize the gain in a way they're not going to get dinged for it. And so it allows them to trade up into something else. Maybe they've owned this piece of property for a while and they're kind of over the management of it and it's worth more than what they paid for it. And they're like, listen, I'm ready to get into something else that I really would prefer to own more of. And so they're able to do that. They're able to exit and the government rewards you for stimulating the economy. That's really what the tax code is for. It's a set of rules that's meant to help stimulate the economy. People always, look at it and they're like, oh, taxes are just there to burn you. No, there are ways around paying taxes legally that you could take advantage of. And a lot of the ways you can do that is in the real estate industry in general. There's different ways to do it. I think one of the most common ones is this strategy, is 1031s. And so something that we as operators have figured out how to do for passive investors, which I think is unique. It's a unique advantage that we have, but in general, it's such a powerful tool that a lot of people pay attention to once they figure out what it is. We're getting calls all the time from people like, hey, I'm selling this house. I don't want to pay all this tax. What can we do with that? So it's something that you hear about quite often, and it's something that people always want to learn how to take advantage of. There are rules around it, which we can get into how it works specifically and mechanically, but that's what it is.
Yeah, so one of the problems of a 1031 exchange, the benefit is that you can defer taxes, and that's super cool. That's awesome, right? So when you sell something, normally you have to pay capital gains, and this allows you to defer that, and you can do it over and over and again. So that's cool. The problem with it is that you have to continue being an active investor. And a lot of you here on the call, they're like, my gosh, I don't want to actually continue managing this rental property. I actually would like to get out of it and invest something in more passively. And 1031 exchanges typically are not really meant for that. They kind of keep you in the active investing game. And now instead of managing a rental, in San Jose, California, you now roll it over into a small multi-unit, say in Ohio. Okay, that's super cool. But now you got a management headache on your hands. But again, cool that you can defer capital gains. That's super awesome. The trick is, how do you go from being more of an active investor, from going from rental with a lot of equity into something more passive? And I think that's what Garrett is talking about here, it's not normally done. Now, we've done this now for several deals, and let's talk about that because it really is a great way to get out of the active investing into the passive investing, which is probably why you had that rental in the first place. And so let's talk about that. Maybe talk a little bit first about maybe why it's not normally done. Maybe like, why is it not normally done, and why is this a little unusual? And then let's talk about how that works.
Yeah, so it's not normally done because not every person that's out there that owns and operates multifamily syndications has figured out how to do it legally, or has really spent the time to invest in that area of their business. And so what we've done that's a little different. So we have the legal team that knows how to structure this properly, and we've actually gone through the process multiple times in selling our own deals and then having other people invest into our deals through a tenants in common structure. And we've done it enough that we know exactly the pitfalls and the how to actually mechanically get it done. And so the way you would do it is if you own a piece of property as an active investor, and there's an operator that facilitates this. Not everybody does it. Typically, what you'll do is you'll co-buy a property with that syndicator in what's called a tenants in common structure. And so if you imagine there's the syndication, which is normally an investor like us, we're going to go ahead and get a bunch of investors to come into the deal inside of an entity that is basically one of the owners of the property. And that is its own thing. It's like its own tree on the org chart. Then next to that, as a co-owner, you have your tenants in common. So that would be the 1031 exchanger. So that what happens is the 1031 exchanger, the way it works is they will sell a piece of property. It will go into their gains will go in with a qualified intermediary. Okay, that's like the third party that helps facilitate the 1031. While it's in with the qualified intermediary, that person now has 45 days to identify a like-kind property, meaning that property has to have a similar debt structure and ratio and equity structure. And purchase price in order to qualify for the 1031 and get the max proceeds on it. Okay, so they have to go out. Basically, they get 3 properties that they can find, and they can put it on a piece of paper, and they submit that within 45 days of closing, and then that allows them to execute a 1031 exchange. Now, once they find a property, identify one that they want to go into that's like kind, then they have 6 months to close it. So generally what happens is somebody calls us, they say, hey, I'm under contract on a deal, I'm selling it, and I've got some money coming in, and I'm looking for a property. I didn't know you guys do 1031 exchanges, but how does it work? Okay, and so then we'll say, sure, all you need to do is cover the legal costs are a decent amount, usually around 10,000 to set everything up. Cover the legal, and we'll facilitate. There is a minimum because it has to make sense on both sides. So the minimum is 350,000 with us. Some people, the minimum is $1 million. And then if you have that minimum, then we'll help facilitate the entire thing, setting up the tenants in common, setting up the legal and structure, coordinating with the QI to get the funds into closing. Then we'll go, when we close the deal, we'll talk with the QI. The QI will send the funds into closing, and then we use that to help facilitate the closing on the deal. Our CPA helps with everything outside of that and getting it structured. And then at the end, we don't actually send out a K1, but we'll send all the details that that person would need to work with their CPA inside of their exchange for tax purposes and all that stuff. So that's generally how it works when you get into a passive 1031 exchange. You are a co-owner with the syndicator, and then there's a whole legal structure that gets set up that allows it to be legal to 1031 inside of the US.
So you are essentially the operator of of this tenant in common, this entity. You are the active operator of that entity, and you essentially become, you're not the same as a general partner, but it's like that from a legal structure, right? Which means that in the IRS's eyes, it appears to be more like an active investment, except for the fact that you're going to have partners, which is us, to actually do all the operations of it. And so therefore, it satisfies the legal requirement, but also allows you to get access to more active real estate. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. I mean, it works great for all of us because there's a lot of equity in people, and people aren't selling their houses because they don't want to pay the taxes. They don't want to sell the house to pay the taxes, and then they're like, well, what am I going to do with it? And this
cash. I really don't want to pay the capital gains. What do you have for me? That type of thing has to time up right. So there's that, or people invest into one of our apartment complexes. We go, would you like to stay in and go? We exit out and they're like, well, I'm not ready to take my money back and get a cap. Partners on as well in a tenants in common structure.
What about on the back end, Garrett? All right, so we roll someone in from a single family house. Let's
No, it can't be the end. So we're if the person
You're not locked into us. But you're not required to do so. What I suggest is that maybe you have a conversation with us. I'm going to put this link here in the chat. We can orchestrate this. Intro. All right, let's take some questions here as well. Anything, Garrett, while people are
I think every generally what we found, they're like, I don't want to deal with this. I'd like to just get reports sent to me. Don't have to, but you know, because we do charge for our services, right? So there's you don't own 100% of it anymore, but 100% of the headaches are gone.